Good afternoon and good evening, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, and welcome to the Ambassadorial Wing and another installment of Council of One's Babylon 5 review. And of course, I am your host, the Ambassador, and glad to see you all today. And for those of you that are catching this live, hope you're having a great week. Hope it has been a productive and a fun week. And of course, it is Friday night or Friday afternoon, depending on where you're at. And we are back with another installment of the B5 review. And today we are covering Season 4, Episode 7, Epiphanies. And with me, I've got my fellow council members, Zod Rider, Mountains of Elysium, and Lord Koj. Gentlemen, good to see you all. Thank you for being here. And as always, it's a pleasure. And anyway, how are we all doing?
Good.
Oh, I'm good. Happy to be here. I like this episode a lot too, so I'm excited.
As do I. And to everybody that is in the chat, whether you're lurking or if you're chatting it up, Colin P. Smith and Beerford 31, gentlemen, good to see you as always, and thank you for being here. I appreciate it. And make sure, if you're catching this live or if you catch the replay later, make sure you smash that like button, share this out with all your fellow B5 or sci-fi friends, and tell them, hey, there's this really cool channel called the Ambassadorial Wing doing these weekly podcast live streams, on Babylon 5. But that being said, gentlemen, I have done my intro. We shall begin our review, of course, of Epiphanies. And of course, our good friend and fellow council member, Fiona Wolf, has been gracious enough, as always, to upload a short review video of her own. So, gentlemen, if you want to start there, we can, or we can start elsewhere.
I don't mind starting with her because she always has great insight and it's a good skeletal frame to kick off.
Yeah.
I don't know. What do you guys feel?
Yeah, exactly. And she definitely always has great anecdotes and like she triggers memories of things that you might not have remembered from your initial viewing of the episode or if you rewatched it. So it's always nice when she uploads those videos. So that's cool.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, give me just a tick, gentlemen, and I will get that pulled up so that we can hear it and see it. And we will check out what Council Member Wolf has to say. 2 seconds. Ooh, and this one's long. It's 13 minutes and 40 seconds. Right on, Fiona. So, all right. Can you all see it? I'm assuming.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
All right. Well, and here we go.
Oh man, how to start out Epiphanies. It pretty much is like the one rock has been concluded, the big old shadow war and everything else, but now here comes the after effects with a good old President Clark and Bester's scheming and everything else. Thing is, Bester is trying to play both sides up the middle, and it's not going to turn out too good for him. Not in the long run. And the only reason why his in cryostasis girlfriend even survives all this is because Sheridan and his crew have genuine morals, and of course they're not going to put somebody off to the side that might genuinely love this guy, no matter how impossible it might seem. And of course, you get to see a little bit more of on the Garibaldi's end of things, where he is finally pushing away from all his friends and allies. The initial big step, which is going to cause more problems later, but also give him a chance to kind of redeem himself, even though it's not really Garibaldi's fault. Another cat's paw for Psychor. And you figure with the way Garibaldi's character's been built up, that it would be a big point for him, since in his previous kind of setups, even from Mars all the way to going to Babylon 5, he's always been at odds with the Psychor in some way or another. So yeah, Bester's gonna have a field day with this, but it's not without its consequences. And of course, Clark orders, the station to be operation or priority one because his big giants in the playground are now gone. Humanity, of course, still has some of the shadow tech to build some of its stuff from, but seeing how the station brought everybody together to take out a bunch of first ones, even though it was mostly due to ideological maneuvering, it still showcased that Sheridan's able to bring a lot of people together because sometimes, just the sheer numbers, even if the enemy has more tech capability, can even the odds tremendously. And it's like not like the White Stars are sitting there doing nothing either. Eventually the Babylon 5 forces will consolidate into the Interstellar Alliance, and of course they're going to be building more White Stars and more ships. Woo! And of course, you get to see a little bit of the fallout with Londo's stuff. Like, his star is definitely in the center of everything now, especially with the Emperor gone. And the Centauri people are looking for a bit of stability. Oh boy. I don't think they're going to like that bit of stability that's going to come creeping in within the form of the Drakh, and that's never pleasant.
That's okay.
And of course, you get to see a little bit of Jakar and Franklin. With Jakar coming back all beaten and bruised, well, Franklin takes a look, and even though he's not able to initially get the right kind of eye, and Jakar's like, "It's not my proper color." Oh, just the way he says that is pretty on point. When in reality, it's the actor's actual eye color. Oh, but the reason why poor Franklin can't get quite the correct kind of implant is because, the station still has to rely on allies to get materials in. So, with Narn being the way it is right now, they probably don't have too much of a tech base to give out certain kinds of implants. It's going to take a little while because everybody's licking their wounds in one way or another. From Vorlon allied people to Shadow allied people, everybody's a bit messed up after this Shadow War. But Jakar's still grateful for what Mr. Franklin can offer. And I find it telling that Jakar didn't take up a leadership role with the Narn regime. They probably would have turned him into like how shall we say this? Kind of like the Narn version of Mother Teresa, I guess. Where he'd be kind of more like a symbolic kind of figurehead rather than actually doing stuff, for his people. Because his people, the way they reacted when, breaking away from the Centauri again, like, and asking him, "Oh, what did you lose in all this?" It's like, all you gotta do is look at Jakar to see what he lost. I'm like, oh my god, people, come on. Seriously? But yeah, Garibaldi's break away from everybody is really starting with that recording. It makes me wonder, like, how Bester and his people were able to get, like, these little coded things to him, because it's not going to be the first time they do that to him. It's just going to be like a slow acceleration in terms of, just breaking Garibaldi off from all his known allies to get him to be a complete rogue agent. But in the reality, they want to do that because they want him to also investigate certain things on Mars and everywhere else. And they know he's familiar with Mars. So as kind of like a weird double agent, he'd be able to get more stuff done. But yeah, it's not going to be a pleasant ride. Nope. And of course, you get to see Mr. Zach Allen dealing with all sorts of fun stuff, And of course, he's been set up to take over for Garibaldi in case something happens. Well, this is a whole big old something that happens. I still find it amusing that all the Elvis impersonators show up after Bester. It's like, this guy can't catch a break at all. None whatsoever. But I do find Jakar's reunion with Mr. Garibaldi to be quite heartwarming. And the fact that, even though Bester did mess with Garibaldi's head, it really wasn't to break him away from, like, Jakar or whatnot, but it was more to alienate him from the Babylon 5 command staff. But I do like the fact that when they see each other again, Garibaldi's all worried, like, "Oh God, I got Jakar got captured because of me," and then you see Jakar just pick him up. It's like, "Welcome back, Mister Garibaldi." Oh man, it just proves that Jakar has definitely taken like more of a Buddhist look at the universe. It's like eventually everything plays out, and the universe puts you where you need to be, that sort of thing. Because if
Okay, we're going to pause right there because there is an awful lot to dig into. So, gentlemen, your initial thoughts on what Fiona's brought up so far. I'll bring this down here.
I
I
love
think-
the relationship with Jakar and
Mhm.
Garibaldi. I think it's one of the best, deeply layered friendships throughout the entire series. So I just wanted to get that out. Sorry to cut you off.
No, you're good.
Yeah.
What I was going to say is Garibaldi acts like himself around Jakar. Like from what Fiona was saying, Bester wasn't trying to split him off from everyone, just the command staff. And when he's with Jakar, you can't tell that there's something up, but when he's around his old friends, you can really tell something's being screwed with.
Yeah, exactly. Because the way I look at it, I see Bester when he's in eye contact, he could send signals like he did with Talia, and what he tried to do with Jason Ironheart. It's like something that they do. They send either codes, like telepathic codes, or little buffers, or little kind of like a what is it? Kind of like a virus, computer virus that's programmed to do a specific thing and shut off. And since Bester's with Psycord, they probably have a lot of files on the command staff, and having connections with President Clark and doing business with EarthGov, they have access to files of the Earth Force Alliance command staff. So when they're programming him to react or have blocks in certain thoughts and emotional reactions from his, from the neurological connections in his brain, they would program it according to what they know. What they do not know is the alien species. So when he's interacting with like Jakar, he probably doesn't have any blocks there. So he's being the good old Garibaldi uninfluenced that we know and love. And I do, going back to that, I love Garibaldi's interaction with Jakar, because then we see Jakar's newfound freedom of not being chained to his old aspirations of being a leader, getting power, because he had such a drastic revelation of what it means to be a free Narn, but also to be a free sentient being within the universe. Like his perception has started to go bigger beyond just being exactly what Fiona said, the Mother Teresa symbol that he now detests. Now that's gross. Before, he was like, oh, us being weak and powerless is something I'm against and don't want. Now it's the opposite. He doesn't want power. He wants more like understanding and making a real difference in his hands, which we see in season 5 gets depleted as he becomes a kind of Mother Teresa thing, which hence, embarks his next journey. But we'll get into that when we get there. I just think it's just so brilliant how the interactions with the Earth staff or Earth, I'm not saying it right, but his human friends compared to his alien friends, you see the difference right there, plain and simple, and that shows like there's been tampering, definitely with Psychor. I see.
Well, and here's the thing. And just real quick to Lewis Cox. Lewis, you're doing okay. Cannot complain. And thank you for being here, bud. Hope you enjoyed the stream. So, for me, I think the title of this episode is very appropriate considering everything that they have just gone through. And Garibaldi says it very, very well at the start of the episode when he's talking to Sheridan, Ivanova, and Franklin. He's like, we fought for our own freedom and to do our own thing. He's like, if you're not going to let me do that, then what the hell were we fighting for? And that is honestly a very epiphanial thing to say, because if you look at this episode in total, Jakar has a grand epiphany on his own accord. Zach Allen has a couple of epiphanies also that he is ready to lead, that he is ready to take over as head of security, and that he is capable of doing it. Bester has an epiphany that Lita Alexander, there is much more to her than it appears. I mean, when you see him trying to scan everybody there in that conference room and she blocks him each and every time, and then she gives him a bit of a headache and a bit of a mental punch in the head, and you see his head go back and you see that smirk, you realize, and he realizes just how powerful Lita is now. But there's also an additional epiphany within this episode. Sheridan realizes also how powerful Lita is as well. And she also Lita realizes the precarious position that she's in and the very uncomfortable position that she is in, because when Zach goes to her quarters and she's trying to try and redecorate her quarters and so on, and she's like, nobody ever just comes to say hello. Either you want somebody blocked, you want somebody scanned, you want me to set up the Vorlons in the shadows so that you can take them out. But she's like, no one ever really comes to just say hi. And Zach tells her, hey, you were close to the Vorlons, and right now they're not particularly popular. And she realizes in that moment, it may not be what she wants to hear, but it's what she needs to hear. And she has to come to terms with that. And I think throughout the course of this season, she does. And here's another one that I picked up on. The epiphany between Londo and Jakar. Jakar is not going to go physically after Mollari because there's nothing to be gained by it, but he says to him, my world is now free. You no longer exist in my universe. Pray we never notice each other again. Londo has an epiphany or a revelation at that particular moment that things will never really be the same between him and Jakar ever again. At least not until situations or circumstances change. So I think Straczynski titling this episode Epiphanies was very, very appropriate. And of course, we have the epiphany or revelation that the shadows were not working alone. And obviously, we will find out in the due course of time the name of their chief associates, and that is, of course, the Drakh. But from here, we just know that they head to Centauri Prime and that they put one of their keepers on the Regent. So, gentlemen, either any thoughts on anything I just brought up, or we can continue on with Fiona's video.
Sorry, couldn't unmute. No, I think we're good to go with Fiona's video. And we can all then kind of chime in after.
Okay.
Please.
All right. Give me just a second, and I will pull this back up, and we will get back into it. Ensure. And there we go. Okay.
Jakar had gone through what he gone through. He's probably wouldn't be freed by now. Probably been like another 100 years of occupation or something. And then, of course, you get to see the fallout of what happens with Lita. Without the Vorlons there, she doesn't have much of an income. But then you realize just how absolutely crazy the other ambassador kept her quarters. Like, yes, you could have a bed, but that's only because you have to sleep. The rest of her quarters are completely bare of everything, and it just shocks, Zach Allen. I'm like, oh boy. Wow, because even Brother Theo's monks have a couple of personal effects, But it also points out like people only seem to be calling on Lita when they need her help with some sort of telepathic situation and whatnot, and she's getting a little bit peeved about that. It's like, why doesn't anybody want to visit me just for a social call? That sort of thing. Which makes the tie-in with Third Space to this even more like, oh man, because Zach really did have a crush on her, because I seem to remember like he brought in like pizza and a few other things for her, and it's just like, oh man, there goes Mr. Zach Allen, never quite connecting with Lita. Because I think out of all the relationships Lita had, it probably would have been a pretty healthy one for her to have with Zach. The romantic sap in me would have been happy to see that. Let's just put it that way. And of course, the Jakar and Londo meeting on the station. Considering all the recent stuff he had to endure, it makes sense that Jakar would be like, stay out of my orbit for a while, Because even though they become kind of like, even though Jakar becomes kind of like strangely enough, a friend of sorts with Mollari, especially you'll see that more in season 5. It's still a pretty raw moment for both of them. You can't just bury that stuff really quickly, so it makes sense that they would be a little bit at odds again. And of course, you got Bester meeting with Lita being there, and Lita just enjoys kind of like having her way with Bester, like, because he does attempt to scan people, and Lita just like bitch slaps him back out of their heads, like boop. It's like, oh my goodness. But it does make you wonder, like, what is her power level? Because you get to see a little bit from Third Space. It's like, ooh, ancient untapped potential there. Oh boy. And I do like everybody's reaction when they see Bester's head snap back. I mean, Lita's looking there like all like the cat with cream, and everybody else is like, having a problem there, Mr. Bester. But really, what he wants to do is he wants to go to the good old Shadow homeworld and be like, I want tech that frees my baby mama, And so, yeah, this is not going to go well. But you get to see the hints of the Drakh evacuating, and even a little bit of banter where get to see just how frayed everybody's stuff is after this war. Sheridan just wants a moment to be able to breathe a bit, which is why his stuff with Delenn before the Minbari Civil War breaks out is even more heartwarming. But oh boy. But yeah, even though Sheridan claims that he wants some things to be calm, Delenn does note that, like, no, you are at your best when everything's hitting the fan all the time. So, yeah, you always want something to be happening. It gives you something to do, a purpose. But ultimately, they play off each other very well. I like that. For the most part, a lot of these characters play off of each other really well because the actors play off each other really well. But yeah, God, and poor Zach Allen's just like, there is something wrong with Mr. Garibaldi, and he's really the first one to pick up on it for the most part because he's worked with him the closest. I mean, sure, everybody else on this station is pretty close, but sometimes, certain kinds of working relationships, you really get to see what a person's made of, and that's why Zach was kind of like the canary in the coal mine. It's like, there's something wrong here. Ever since his abduction, he hasn't been quite right. Oh boy. And of course, Bester has to sacrifice some of his Black Omega Force to make certain things look like, oh yes, I'm totally with you. But, that's the thing with the villains. Like, they're constantly trying to, go out of their way to get the ace in the hole over everybody, when in the end, that's usually what gets them undone. And you'll definitely see more of that if you decide to read the Psychor trilogy. After the series is done, it's like, oof, baby, oof. So there you go. They get to see the Drakh evacuation and know that there's some sort of unfortunate things to arise there, because the Drakh don't just go after the Centauri. They go after the Minbari too, because the Minbari were a big linchpin in Sheridan's forces to get rid of the Shadows. So they figure, why not? Let's punish everybody. So they get to be a part of the Minbari Civil War too. It's like, yay, spreading that non-love around. And of course, the closing part, you get to see just how crazy the Drock angle will get for the Centauri, because that poor prime minister, the regent rather, I'm thinking pastels. Well, it's more than pastels, my friend. I'm sorry. There it is, the keepers on his neck. So there you go. A episode of transition, but not without many rock falls. See you later, everybody.
Oh, Fiona. Always good insight. So, gentlemen,
She's fantastic.
well, that's why I have her on the council, because she is fantastic. So, gentlemen, your thoughts on what what Fiona had to say. The floor is yours, gentlemen. Let's have at it.
She totally broke it down. To be honest, I mean that was like you guys have been saying. That was fantastic.
Well, and the funny thing for me is, like I said in the chat, I swear I did not watch this in advance. But it's like, how do we know that Fiona isn't psychic herself?
She's
a P12.
Say that again, fellas.
I was going to say P11, but I think Koj topped that with a P12.
I was thinking the same thing.
P12.
She might very well be. Well,
Or maybe higher.
Oh.
Yeah. Maybe. Well, to kind of bounce off something that she had brought up in terms of Delenn and Sheridan. Sheridan has a very interesting little narration at the beginning of the episode. He's like, we won. But it cost us a lot. He's like, the doc says, live for today, for tomorrow, maybe even worse. And of course, here comes worse in the form of Alfred Bester. And, there's another revelation, and I hate to admit this, as much as I hate the character of Bester. For a split second, he shows just a smidgen of his humanity that he hasn't sold up the river for the Psychor. And honestly, I think that one scene there where he's staying in front of the cryo chamber where his lover is at is very telling of who he really is. He may have this power, he may have this position and everything else, but he says it. It's so quiet at home. There's no one to talk to. He is truly a man who seemingly has everything and has nothing. And as I said, there's just a pang of remorse for him, and then I realize how many people he's hurt, how many people he's wounded, how many people he's wronged and manipulated for his own ends, including Mr. Garibaldi. And I think what Lita said to Sheridan there in her quarters towards the end of the episode is very telling. She's like, he has sent me so many other people's friends and loved ones away. Maybe it was time for him to learn how much it hurts to lose someone that he cares about. And Sheridan responds in kind. He's like, and you didn't tell me, because if you had told me what you were planning to do, Bester would have scanned me and he would have known and potentially tried to stop her. Although I would have liked to seen Bester try to stop her and her just completely cave his head in. Because I have a feeling at her power level, she probably could. But, there is a chain of command. And with Sheridan, the buck stops with him. And it does really does speak to the tenuous position that Lita and Sheridan will be in later on down the road, and particularly in season 5. So, as she said, this episode is an episode of transitions, but at the same time, it is not without its moments that really take your breath away. And honestly, I know this is a slower episode. There isn't a whole lot of action that goes on, but considering everything that has gone on in the last couple episodes before this, I think we needed just a little slowdown. Guys, am I coming through okay? Are you having any problems hearing me?
No, I'm hearing you fine.
Yeah,
okay.
Perfect.
Okay. Koj, it might just be on your end, maybe. So.
I
I was saying a little bit away from the microphone too, so that might have had something to do with it. So, Elysium, please.
No, I was just thinking it's when Bester was speaking with his lover, how he described, I imagine they're laughing now that something had gone wrong, and how badly he's judged the characters of Sheridan, Franklin, and Ivanova. Now, Franklin does offer in season 5, scan me, you'll feel my true feelings. He knows he doesn't like Bester, but his feeling towards telepaths is, I care about humans. I don't care whether they're telepaths, who or what they are. Franklin cares. But Bester isn't wrong either. Sheridan is very prejudiced against telepaths. Ivanova hates Psychor on principle. And, well, Franklin personally dislikes Bester. So it's a funny thing. He's misjudged their character, but if he actually scanned them and scanned them deeply, he'd probably still find the reason for his prejudice. So it's a sad fact that Bester's own prejudice is fueled by a kernel of truth.
Yeah. To address Colin's comment here, if Jason Ironheart was at least a P13, what the smeg is Lita? Probably well beyond the P20. If there was a scaling of any kind beyond P12 or P13, potentially a P30 or a P50 even. Because consider what she can do. I mean, look at that display that she puts on in that one episode in season 5. Look at the fact that she's not only able to block Bester from scanning her and everybody else in the room, but she sends that telepathic signal all the way through hyperspace to Zahadu. And she was able to trigger the self-destruct device on Zahadu, or at least tell the others that are there, obviously the Drakh, to trigger it. So the big thing is Lita is immensely powerful. And like she says to Mr. Garibaldi, or I think Mr. Allen actually, no, it was Mr. Garibaldi, I think, in season 5, when she's in custody in the holding cell. When Garibaldi says, well, that person would be the equivalent of a telepathic thermonuclear device, and she turns around and her eyes are glowing red, and she's like, pleasure to meet you, Mr. Garibaldi.
Ooh, I love that part.
That is absolutely positively telling of what the Vorlons did to Lita. She is their last big surprise. And they poured everything that they could into her. She could probably, if she had the will and she was pissed off enough, she could probably crush a good chunk of Babylon 5 just on her own through her telepathic and telekinetic abilities alone.
It's kind of like Lita Alexander is Babylon 5's version of Jean Grey Dark Phoenix, or Phoenix Jean Grey, all in one.
Essentially, Koj, yes, and I think that's a very appropriate analogy or parallel for what Lita Alexander is. Because if you consider the power level that Jean Grey possesses when she is possessed by the Phoenix Force, it is terrifying. there's a reason why when you see that Firebird in the sky, people are legitimately frightened. And that's why anyone that's around Lita is legitimately frightened, because they consider what she is and what she can do. So
Definitely. And they're both redheads.
that is all. Yeah,
I just realized that.
yeah, you're not wrong, guys. You're not wrong. And I'll bring up Colin's comment here. I always read that she triggered the self-destruct device once they reached Zahadum's system personally. Colin, that's a very distinct possibility. I mean, you consider the fact that, like she said, or Sheridan said, if somebody started to send a signal through hyperspace the minute we left Babylon 5, that would have given everybody on the planet enough time to get out. So the potential there is she got the Drock out of there, and then she triggered the self-destruct sequence or devices or whatever. And if you notice, each one of those self-destruct devices was in a city below the surface of Zahadum. And there was I think 3 or 4 illuminated areas just before the planet went critical. Just goes to show you just how powerful the Shadows technology actually was. If they not only can they destroy a planet with their planet killer, but the fact that they can destroy their own planet in the blink of an eye, essentially. And I'll bring up Elysium's comment here as well. Oh, hey, LDG, good to see you, bud. Thank you for popping in. P5 originally, P14, P30 adjusted.
That's the from the Babylon Wiki.
That is absolutely frightening if you think about it.
So. I was just thinking her action probably saved all of their lives, because
I agree.
The Drak themselves, we see how dangerous they are in later seasons. And there was one White Star going up against basically a Drak fleet and a First One's planet with all of the planetary defenses in place. That was not something they should have, I think, taken on so lightly or with so few resources.
Yeah, very true. I think that White Star that Sheridan then were on would have had a hard time. And here's the thing I guess I kind of missed. I wasn't aware that there was a local jump gate near Zahadum. I figured it was like an isolated world that the only way you could jump in and out was through hyperspace portals that a ship generated. I wasn't aware that there was a jump gate near Zahadum. So that actually was a interesting little piece of info right there.
I think that kind of in some ways makes sense, because a lot of their followers may not have the technology, or the Shadows may not want them to have the technology to open their own jump points. So they'll have needed a way to get there.
Yeah, that's true too.
I also kind of wondered 2 things with Epiphanies. One is like that jump gate. I wondered if it was like stealthily hidden all this time. And then when Shadows left, I guess, it revealed itself. Kind of like, how you see in Tales and, King Arthur Tales, that usually if the magician or sorceress or witch or wizard died, their magic, faded, and, whatever they did got undone or revealed.
Yeah.
So maybe when they lost the war, the jump gate that's by Zahadum, was no longer cloaked, and then it was, visible.
Yeah, that's a distinct possibility too, Koj. And I'll bring up, I've got Colin's comment up here. Fair point, but if she had residual orders from the Vorlons, would they have wanted to prevent Shadow Tech from falling into anyone else's hands? Yep, that's a distinct possibility. And I imagine the Shadows probably wouldn't want their technology falling into anyone else's hands either, or potentially maybe they did. Considering that they are all about survival of defense, they would have wanted somebody to have access to their tech potentially.
Actually, I think Colin's point is great if you tie back to third space. I think Leto was behind a lot of the people who were fighting against those influenced by third space. That the Vorlon programming got her to influence them to attack. So it could be some of the same programming that not just her triggered. It wasn't just her behind triggering the defenses on Zahadum.
Yeah, that's true too. And Colin's other comment here. Also, the Icarus. Also, was the Icarus jump capable? It didn't look that big. Colin, that's a distinct possibility too. That might just be something we may have missed because we were focused on so many other things in terms of was there not a jump gate around Zahadum? There very well may have been all that time. So,
from what I forgot where, but my understanding is what the Icarus did not have jump gate ability.
Yeah.
I mean, but it had to jump at the nearest safest area that they had and then get closer to Zahadum. So it was a long drive, but it wasn't at the Zahadum one.
Yeah, that's a distinct possibility too. And I've got Beer 31's comment.
Because they mentioned they discovered it.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
Yeah. And Bureau says, we already know Zahadum has a jump gate from season 2 where Jakar runs away from the Shadow Fighters. That was Zahadum, right? Yeah, Jakar had gone to Zahadum to see if the Shadows had returned. And he used the local jump gate. So I guess it's just.
Wait, was he at Zahadum or was he leaving? I forget. Like, was he in a different sector and the Shadows were chasing him from?
They were chasing him, but I'm pretty sure he was around Zahadum with several other fighters, and the other fighters bought time for him to escape through that jump gate. So I guess maybe we just misremembered something in the fact that
probably it was like always there. Just everyone's like, that is taboo. Don't even go there. Okay.
So anyway, but guys, any other thoughts on this episode? Anything we may have potentially missed?
I'd like to return to one thought I had about, when Bester was talking to his lover, and he said, I bet they're all making fun of me. Because I've always wondered, because we've seen before, like since we saw Bester in the beginning of season 1, he would break the rules of like reading other people's minds, and maybe because of status and power and his level of being, P12, P11, I forget what Bester is. It's P12, right? Cyclops are P12.
Yeah, Cyclops are P12, yes. Yeah,
so he's P12. So his power and his political and official power, I often wondered that, because Bester had poked too far as to when someone was dying and he'd always do death scans. My thing is, I wonder if, I always thought that, how often does Bester cheat? And I'm thinking often enough, to the point where maybe he's even jaded. Because there's two things. When you read someone's mind, because we all have bad thoughts, crazy thoughts we don't act on, but thoughts that enter our mind just because, Now, if someone's looking at what we say aloud, mixed with the thoughts that we have but don't really commit to, but they're in our minds, I'm wondering if that's another thing that's jaded Bester's view on everything. Like maybe he's spent too much time in the thoughts that don't manifest to speech.
Do you guys think that Bester
and then everything's just kind of extra darker for Bester?
Do you guys think that Bester is more than a P12? Because I always thought that he was, and he was just hiding that he was more.
I think he's like a P15, honestly. I don't think he pushed too far.
Because he always had the ability to like you were just saying about how he would always be scanning people even though he says he's not. And you remember like how like he would say, well, you can trust me, I'm not scanning anybody. I always thought he always was still scanning people, and he just had the ability to do it subtly in a way where people would detect it because he's way more powerful than he lets on.
Although his very first introduction, he scans Sinclair's brain.
Right.
And it's as if he's talking to him, and Sinclair gets really pissed and says, "Get out of my head."
Sinclair knew.
So, well, the big thing is with Bester, he's like an onion. He makes you cry. He's bitter when you bite him, and he's an all-around pain in the ass. But there's a lot of layers to him, and I think that's what makes him such an interesting character. And honestly, as much as I kind of I don't like Mr. Bester, he's one of those characters that you love to hate.
Right.
I just kind of wish we had gotten the opportunity to see his ultimate fate. I know it's presented out in the books.
You do. It is. It's in the novelization. I don't want to spoil it for you, but the fate of Bester was actually a novel.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I had heard about that. So.
That was a Final Reckoning, wasn't it?
Yeah, and it was basically Garibaldi trying to go after Bester for what he did to him. And it's essentially all about that, and all about that final confrontation and what ultimately happens to Bester. I think if you read the novel Ambassador, you'll be surprised at what ultimately happens. Because
I'll definitely have to check it out.
It's not what it's. I will say it's not anything you would expect, to be sure.
I can imagine. I can truly imagine. So.
And Ambassador, I should mail you my books. I trust you enough. I think you'll take care of them to check them out, and then mail them back to me when you're done. No, seriously, I think I'll go that far because that stuff is great, and I feel.
Oh yeah, the novelizations.
I feel you should read them.
The novelizations are fantastic. Like they really add so many more layers and stuff to the episodes. Oh, they're great.
And they're written by writers and directors of Babylon 5.
Exactly.
Cool. Well, Koj, we can talk about that off air and everything.
Definitely, bro.
We can see about that. So, I do want to bring up Elysium's comment here, just as a nice little thing to start wrapping this up. Verini's comment: if you reduce the family tree to a family bush, you can't hide as much underneath. Yeah, and let's be candid. As much as we all find Carthage wacky, he'd be crazy. Crazy.
Mm-hmm.
As Verini said, too much intermarrying, really. And way too much intermarrying. So,
I think it's a combination of that and just being spoiled rotten by just the facade and propaganda of that culture. The bad side of the culture.
Yeah. And I do want to bring up Beer 31's comment here. At the end, Sheridan asks where the Drakh are going, but we know Sheridan remembers the time jump in War Without End. So why doesn't Sheridan get the Drakh going to Centauri Prime? Maybe it slipped his mind. Maybe
either that, or he doesn't remember exactly when the time jump takes place, because all that can be jumbled in your head too. He might not know exactly at what point that's going to happen. I've always thought, could you imagine if somebody from if we found out there was a timeline in which Babylon 5 actually occurred and it was real? Could you imagine going to that timeline with the DVDs, trying to show them what was going to happen in their timeline? Like if you went back to what was going on in season 2 and said, okay, Sheridan, this is what's going to happen to you. You got to watch these little discs, and you'll be able to see what's going to happen. And this might help you and give you some insight.
I think Kosh beat us to it. He just did it in a Vorlon way.
I was just going to say. And Colin makes a great point here. You can get the get the ebook versions of these Babylon 5 novels and basically put them on whatever device you like to read.
Well, I do have a Kindle. I just don't use it very
That's
often.
All you would need to do. That's all you would need to do. You could send them. You get the ebook versions and just send them straight to your Kindle. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. So I might definitely look into that when I have the time. So anyway.
But if not, I got you, bro.
I appreciate it, Coach. Well, guys, I think we're going to go ahead and wrap up here, but I want to thank Fiona for another great video. Thank you for your contribution, my dear, and we appreciate it. We look forward to seeing you, having you back with us next week. And guys, Another great stream, another great discussion. As always, I appreciate it. So, any final thoughts before we close, and then we'll close.
Sheridan is the greatest of all time.
That's
Team
that goes
Jakar
without-
here.
Yes. And Sheridan has won Best Captain in Sci-Fi 2 years running on my Twitter poll.
Nice.
So yay.
So, well, anyways, folks, I want to thank you all for tuning in this afternoon or this evening or whenever you catch this, and I hope you all enjoyed the discussion. As always, we will be back next week with another installment, and we'll be covering the next episode of season 4. So be sure to tune in for that. I do want to let you all know I will be doing a special Afternoons with the Ambassador stream this Sunday at 1:30 Central Time in celebration of Madam Ambassador's birthday, and we'll be doing a director spotlight on one of her favorite directors and one of mine as well, the one and only James Cameron. So be sure to tune in for that. And as always, the link for the stream will be in the chat. So if you want to come on and discuss the films of James Cameron with me, by all means, you are welcome as always. But make sure you smash that like button. Make sure you share this out. And if you come across this stream and you are not a member of the Ambassador Wing, consider hitting that subscribe button. And I know that Elysium included the links to everybody's channel, whether they were present or absent. Just make sure you go check out all the other council members and give them a subscribe as well, because they are worth your time. So, but that all being said, folks, you have a great weekend and wherever you are at. And this is the Council of One saying, in 3, 2, 1. Zooty,
Zooty, zoot.
zoot, zoot, zoot.
Zoot.
Good night, everybody.
Oh, we're getting closer.
We're getting there.
So close.
We're getting there. All right. Good night, everybody.